On the far-off planet of Vorak, the air was thin, and the sky seemed permanently covered in a dull gray haze. A war had once raged across the stars, but now the planet was broken. Most of its cities were in ruins, their once shiny buildings now cracked and crumbling. The wars had come and gone, but Vorak had been forgotten. No one cared about the orphans left behind, no one except for each other. In one small, hidden corner of Vorak, a group of alien children lived in an old, abandoned shelter. They were from different planets and species, but they had one thing in common. They had lost everything. Their families had been wiped out, their homes destroyed, and their worlds taken over by a galactic war they hadn't asked for. Now, they were alone on a planet that didn't care. The leader of the group was Kree, young alien with smooth, shimmering skin and long, sharp ears. Kree's species, the Corridons, were known for their agility and sharp senses. But those abilities were useless in the face of starvation and the harsh environment of Vorak. Kree had always been a strong leader, even if only by necessity. They had learned to survive, but just barely. The days seemed to drag on with no sign of hope, and every night, Kree would look out at the horizon, hoping to see some sign of life. "We need food," Kree said one morning, their voice tired and worn. "We're running out." The others gathered around. Vixa, a tall, four-armed alien with a deep green skin tone, looked at Kree with tired eyes. Vixa had once been a great warrior back on their home planet, a place known for its fierce battles. But now, with no weapons and no enemies to fight, Vixa had become quiet and distant. "We've searched every corner of this place." "There's nothing left," Vixa replied, their voice low. "We'll have to keep rationing what we have." Behind them, Jill, a small and agile creature from a species called the Grimlons, tugged at Kree's sleeve. Jill was the youngest of them all, only 5 years old, with large, curious eyes that were always full of questions. Jill had never known a world without war. But in the shelter, they had found comfort, at least for a time. "Maybe we should leave," Jill said. Looking up at Kree, "Maybe there's somewhere else we can go." Kree sighed, crouching down to Jill's level. "I wish that were true, little one. But the planet is a wasteland. There's nowhere to go. We're stuck here." The others remained silent. The truth was, Kree didn't have the answer. No one did. They had been waiting for months now, hoping for help that never came. The signal they had sent out into space, begging for rescue, had been unanswered. The warships that once filled the skies were gone. Now the stars seemed distant and empty. Kree's thoughts were interrupted by a strange sound, an odd, static crackle in the air. It wasn't the wind, nor was it the usual sounds of broken machinery. This was something different. Something alive? The group froze, eyes wide with curiosity and a little fear. The sound came again, louder this time, like a signal coming from the sky. It's a signal," Kree whispered. "Someone's out there." For a moment, the group stood still, unsure of what to do. Vix's eyes narrowed. What if it's a trap? What if they're enemies? Kree shook their head. "We won't know unless we try." Despite their doubts, the group gathered together, huddling in a circle as the signal crackled again, clearer this time. Then a human voice came through the static. "I'm coming." The message was short, barely a few words, but it was enough to send a ripple of hope through the group. Kree looked around at the others, their expression uncertain. "A human?" Vixa asked. "Why would a human be coming here?" Kree didn't have the answer. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as fierce, unstoppable warriors. They had fought in countless wars, and many alien species, including Krees, had suffered at their hands. But what did this human mean by "I'm coming"? There was only one way to find out. The next few days were filled with a nervous excitement. The orphans didn't know whether to trust the message. But the thought of someone coming to help, even if it was a human, was enough to spark a flicker of hope in their hearts. Kree didn't want to get their hopes up too much, but it was hard to ignore the possibility that someone might actually come to save them. Each day they watched the skies, hoping to see a ship descending from the clouds, but nothing happened. It felt like a cruel joke, hope teasing them with its promises but never showing up. But then, on the 5th day after the message, something happened. A shadow passed over the ruined city, and Kree's heart leaped into their throat. The others noticed it too. They ran to the edge of their shelter and looked up. The sight that greeted them was unlike anything they had ever seen. A ship, sleek and silver, was descending from the clouds, cutting through the air with ease. It was unlike any vessel the orphans had seen before. It wasn't a warship, and it wasn't a cargo ship. It was small, almost too small for the kind of journey it must have made. But it was coming toward them slowly and carefully, as if the pilot knew the dangers of the planet and was taking every precaution. The ship touched down with a soft hiss, landing gently on the cracked ground. The dust settled around it, and for a moment everything was still. Then the hatch opened, and a single figure stepped out. The orphans stared in awe as the human appeared before them. He was tall, dressed in a simple but rugged uniform. He had short dark hair and a weathered face, but his eyes were kind, not harsh. In his hands, he carried a small bag, nothing like the weapons the orphans had expected. Kree felt a mix of emotions: fear, curiosity, and something else. Hope. The human took a step forward and spoke in a calm voice. "I'm here to help." The orphans didn't know how to react. They had never met a human before. Their only knowledge of humans came from the stories they had heard, stories of ruthless warriors and invaders. But this human, he didn't seem like the monster they had been warned about. He seemed almost normal. "I'm Captain Liam Turner," the human said, introducing himself with a slight smile. "I've come to make sure you don't have to survive alone anymore." Kree stared at him, unsure of what to say. Vixa, still cautious, stepped forward and spoke with suspicion. "Why? Why would you help us? What do you want in return?" Captain Turner's eyes softened. "I don't want anything. I'm just here because you deserve a chance to live. No one should be left to die in a place like this." The group looked at each other, uncertain. They had been alone for so long, and now here was this human, offering them help when they had long given up hope. It didn't make sense, but in their hearts, they knew they had to trust him, at least for a while. "We don't have much," Kree said, looking at Captain Turner with a mixture of doubt and hope. "But if you can help us, we'll follow you." The human nodded, his face serious. "I'll do everything I can. But first, we need to make sure you're safe. We'll figure out the rest together." As Captain Turner led them back to their shelter, the orphans couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. Maybe, just maybe, things were about to change for the better, and perhaps the human who had walked into their lives wasn't what they had been taught to fear after all. Captain Liam Turner had been walking for what felt like hours. He led the group of alien orphans through the broken ruins of the city. They had passed collapsed buildings and cracked streets, all of which told the same sad story. Vorak had once been a thriving planet, filled with life and hope. Now it was just a lifeless shell, abandoned by those who once called it home. The orphans followed him in silence, still unsure of what to make of the strange human who had appeared so suddenly in their lives. Kree, the young Corridon leader, walked at the front, eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, alert for any danger. They had been alone for so long, and trusting anyone, especially a human, felt difficult. Behind Kree, the other children moved cautiously. Vixa, the tall, four-armed alien, kept a suspicious eye on Captain Turner, as did Jill, the smallest among them, who still couldn't quite believe a human would come to help. But even Jill's usual skepticism seemed to be fading. As the humans' actions didn't match the stories they had heard, Turner didn't speak much as they walked, and the children didn't ask him many questions. The silence felt heavy, as if everyone was waiting for something. They reached the shelter after a while, a hidden structure tucked deep in the broken city, half buried under rubble. It wasn't much, just a few walls, some old scrap metal, and an overgrown roof, but it was home, and for now, that had to be enough. Captain Turner turned to the group as they approached the entrance. "I'm not here to stay forever," he said softly, "but I can help you for as long as you need it. We'll start with what you need most: food, water, shelter, and then we can plan for the future." Kree looked up at him, their sharp, glistening eyes full of uncertainty. "And you won't hurt us?" they ask, voice quiet but steady. Turner smiled gently. I've never hurt anyone who didn't deserve it, and I don't plan to start now. For the first time since meeting him, Kree felt a small spark of trust. Still, the doubt remained. They had been let down too many times before. The promise of help had always come too late, and they weren't sure if they should believe Turner's words. But there was something about him, something honest in his tone and his actions, that made them want to believe. The group entered the shelter, and Turner followed them inside. The space was dark, but it wasn't as cold as outside. The walls were lined with old furniture and makeshift bedding. The children had done their best to make the place livable, but it was clear they were struggling. I know it's not much, Kree said, sitting down on a pile of old blankets. But it's the best we have. Turner nodded, looking around at the shelter. It's enough for now. We can make it better, though, set his bag down on the floor and opened it. Inside were small, simple tools, a few packets of dried food, and a strange device that hummed softly. The children watched him carefully, still unsure of what to make of it all. Let's start with food, Turner said, pulling out a few packets of dried rations and handing them to the children. I know it's not much, but it'll get you through for now. Vixa took the packet with a frown, still skeptical but too hungry to refuse. She tore it open, and as she ate, she found herself surprised by how much better it tasted than the stale food they had been surviving on. Gil, always the curious one, tugged at Turner's sleeve. What is that thing you're carrying? The small gremlin asked, pointing to the strange humming device. It looked almost like a portable generator, but it was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Turner looked down at the device, a smile playing on his lips. It's a water purifier. I'm going to use it to clean what little water you've got left. We can't survive without clean water, and I know how hard it is to find it here. The children looked at each other in surprise. Water purifier. They had never thought about it like that. For so long, they had relied on scavenging for whatever water they could find, water that was often contaminated and dangerous. But this device could change everything. Turner set the purifier down and began to work. His hands moved quickly, and the hum of the machine filled the room. Within moments, clean, fresh water began to trickle out of the purifier into a small container. The children watched, wide-eyed, as he filled several cups and handed them out. Kree took a sip, feeling the cool, refreshing liquid slide down their throat. It was the first drink of clean water they had had in months. The taste was different, clearer, sweeter. It was something they had almost forgotten could exist in a place like Vorak. This is amazing, Kree said, looking up at Turner with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Where did you get this? Turner shrugged. I've traveled a lot. You pick up a few tricks along the way. Vixa looked at the purifier, then back at Turner. You really came all this way just to help us? Turner met her gaze without hesitation. I didn't come to fight. I didn't come to take anything. I came to make sure you don't have to survive alone anymore. You deserve better than this. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that none of the children had expected. It wasn't just that Turner had arrived with a few supplies. It was the way he spoke calmly, kindly as if they weren't just strangers to be ignored, but people who mattered. As the night went on, the orphans slowly began to relax. They ate, drank, and started to rebuild the shelter with the supplies Turner had brought. For the first time in months, there was a sense of hope in the air, but even as the children worked together, a quiet tension remained. Vixa, as always, was cautious, and Kree couldn't stop thinking about the human's words. You deserve better than this. They wondered if it was possible. Could they really escape the endless cycle of survival they had been trapped in for so long? Later that evening, as the children gathered around a small fire, Captain Turner sat with them, quietly watching the flames. He looked out at the ruined city beyond the shelter, his mind clearly elsewhere. After a long silence, he spoke again. You know, when I first came to this planet, I thought I was here to save you. I thought I had all the answers, he said, his voice thoughtful. But now, I'm starting to think that maybe it's you who will teach me something. The children looked at him curiously, unsure of what he meant. Kree tilted their head. Teach you? What do you mean? Turner smiled softly. You've all survived so much. You're stronger than you think. I've seen soldiers, generals, people who are supposed to be the best at surviving, but they don't have what you have. You've learned to survive by relying on each other. That's something most people never figure out." The words made Kree pause. They had never thought of it that way. They had always focused on just surviving. But Turner was right. They had become a family in a place where families didn't exist anymore. They had learned to lean on one another, to share what little they had, to stay alive together, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep going. The night grew colder, and the orphans huddled together for warmth. For the first time in a long time, they felt safe. Captain Turner's presence wasn't a guarantee of a perfect future, but it was a promise of something they hadn't had in months: hope. As the stars flickered above them, Kree thought about the message they had received days earlier. "I'm coming." It had felt like a lie at first, but now, with Turner sitting beside them, offering food, water, and kindness, it felt like the beginning of something new. Maybe, just maybe, they weren't alone in the universe anymore. The next morning, the children woke up to find their small shelter transformed. The metal walls, once jagged and cracked, had been patched up with supplies Captain Turner had brought. The roof, which had been leaking, was now covered with new material that kept the rain out. Turner had even managed to set up a small cooking station, something the orphans hadn't dared to dream of for months. But as much as the children appreciated the improvements, there was still something in the back of their minds, something that didn't sit right. Vixa, the quiet and strong one, had been the most vocal about their doubts. She had seen too many battles and too many broken promises to trust anyone easily. Even now, as she watched Turner work, she wondered if this was just another trick. Another momentary kindness before they were left to fend for themselves once again. Kree could sense Vix's hesitation. They knew the risks of trusting someone, especially a human, to a Zeeli. They had been burned too many times before, and the others were feeling the same way. Still, the offer of help was genuine. It made Kree feel something they hadn't felt in a long time. "Hope, Captain," Kree said. Standing up from the corner where they had been sitting, "You said you came to help. But we've been let down before. Why should we believe you?" Turner looked up from the fire he was tending and met Kree's eyes. "I can't change the past, Kree, but I'm here now, and that's what matters. You don't have to trust me right away, but if you want to survive, we'll have to work together." The children exchanged glances. It wasn't much of an answer, but it was the best they had for now. Still, the questions lingered in their minds. Could they trust this human? And if they did, what would it cost them? Later that afternoon, Captain Turner gathered the children together. His expression was serious, and the air around him felt heavy with something unspoken. Kree could sense that something was coming. A test, maybe. They were all about to find out whether this human's words were more than just empty promises. "I know you're not sure about me," Turner began, his voice calm but firm. "And I understand that. You've been alone for a long time. You've learned to survive by your own rules, and I respect that. But now, we need to do something more than just survive. We need to find a way out of here, to a place where you can live safely away from all this." Kree blinked, surprised. "You think we can leave this planet? It's been years since anyone cared about it. No one comes here." "I know," Turner said, his eyes darkening with determination. "But I believe there's a way. There's a supply station about a day's walk from here. It's not far, but it's dangerous. The path is full of broken machinery and wild animals, and there are no guarantees we'll make it there in one piece. But we have to try." The mention of danger made the children hesitate. Jill, who had been sitting quietly beside Kree, spoke up in a soft voice. "What if we don't make it?" Turner's expression softened. "There's a chance you won't, but there's also a chance you will. And if we do, we'll have supplies. Maybe even a ship to get you off this planet." Vixa stepped forward, her forearms crossed over her chest. "You want us to go on a dangerous journey with no promise of success? And for what? Hope." "Hope is all we have left," Turner replied, his voice steady. "But it's better than nothing." Kree looked at the other children. They were tired, yes, and scared, but they also knew this could be their only chance. They had lived in fear and survival for so long that the idea of doing something to change their lives, of reaching for something better, was a difficult one. But maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. If we do this, Cree said finally, we do it together. No one gets left behind. Understand? The children nodded, even Vixa, who remained silent but appeared to agree. There was no turning back now. They would follow Turner, but they would also be prepared for whatever came next. The journey began the next morning. Turner led the group through the broken city, and the orphans followed, sticking close to each other. As they moved further into the wilderness, the terrain grew rougher. The once thriving landscape of Vorak had been torn apart by war, leaving behind jagged rocks and destroyed buildings. The path to the supply station was long and full of hazards, but Captain Turner was calm. Leading the way, as if he had done this 1,000 times before, they walked for hours. The sun high above until the ground beneath their feet became increasingly unstable. Vixa scanned the horizon with a practiced eye, her body poised and ready for anything. Though she was still unsure about Turner, she couldn't help but admire his ability to lead the group through such difficult terrain. He seemed to know exactly where to step, what to avoid, and how to keep them moving forward. Stay close, Turner instructed, looking back at the group. We're nearing a dangerous area. There's a broken factory up ahead. It's full of old machines that could be activated if we're not careful. The children nodded, their eyes darting around, alert to any danger. They had all learned to be cautious, to move silently and quickly, but today felt different. The weight of what they were attempting to leave, the only home they had ever known, and risk their lives for something better, was heavier than any of them had imagined as they approached the factory ruins. The ground shook beneath them. The children froze, eyes wide with fear. Jill let out a small whimper, clutching onto Cree's arm. Turner raised a hand, signaling them to stop. Stay calm. We don't want to set off anything that might be inside. There are machines here that can be dangerous if disturbed. He motioned for everyone to stay low as they carefully navigated their way through the wreckage. The factory was a labyrinth of rusted metal and twisted pipes, each corner filled with shadows that seemed to move on their own. The air smelled of oil and dust. The echoes of past destruction hung in the air like a memory of the war. The group moved cautiously, Turner leading the way as he checked each turn and every shadow. But even as he seemed to know exactly where to go, a deep unease settled in Cree's chest. They could hear the faint worry of something mechanical in the distance. Something large. Something dangerous. Stay close, Turner whispered. But just as he finished speaking, a loud, grinding sound echoed through the factory. The ground trembled again, and from behind a pile of rubble, a massive old security machine slowly emerged. Its metal body creaked as it moved, its lights flickering on and off as if it had been dormant for years. The children froze in fear, and Cree could feel their heart pounding in their chest. Vixa, though nervous, stood ready. She was the first to speak. It's one of those machines from the war, she said. We've seen them before. They won't stop until they destroy everything in their path. Turner's face was grim. We can't outrun it, but we can outsmart it. Without another word, he began moving quickly, leading the orphans away from the machine. Using the factory's broken walls and debris as cover, the machine's worry grew louder, and Cree could feel the tension rise. They could hear the heavy footsteps of the machine coming closer, the sound of metal scraping against the ground. This is it, Cree thought, their mind racing. If we don't move fast enough, we won't make it. The sound of the old war machine grew louder as its massive form continued to emerge from behind the rusted debris. Its metal body was scratched and dented, but it still moved with a disturbing purpose, like a beast awakened after years of slumber. Its eyes glowed a faint red, scanning the area for any signs of movement. Cree's heart pounded in their chest. As they crouched low behind a pile of broken machinery, the others huddled around them, trying their best to stay out of sight. They could hear the loud thumps of the machine's footsteps growing closer, each one echoing like a drumbeat. Jill, the smallest of the group, trembled in fear, clutching onto Cree's arm. Stay calm, Cree whispered, their voice barely audible. They tried to keep their own fear in check, though it was hard. This machine was a reminder of how dangerous the world had become, how even the things they thought were gone could still come back to haunt them. Turner's voice broke the silence. "We need to move quickly. There's a passageway up ahead, hidden by that pile of rubble. If we can make it there, we might have a chance." Cree nodded, their mind racing. They could see the path Turner was pointing to. It was their only option, but the machine was moving in their direction. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. "Ready?" Turner asked, his eyes scanning the machine's movements. Cree nodded again. "On 3. 1, 2. Before they could say 3, Turner surged forward, leading the way. The children followed quickly, their legs carrying them as fast as they could go. Every step felt like it took them closer to the machine's heavy footsteps, but they had no choice. If they didn't move now, they'd be trapped. The group sprinted towards the rubble pile, moving fast but staying low. Cree's pulse quickened with each step. They could feel the heat from the machine's sensors on their skin, and they knew that if it spotted them, there would be no escape. Just as they reached the cover of the rubble, the machine's lights flashed bright red, and it let out a loud mechanical roar. It had seen them. "Run!" Turner shouted, his voice full of urgency. Cree's legs pushed them forward faster than they thought possible. The other children followed, and for a moment, Cree could only focus on the sound of their own breathing, the rush of adrenaline pushing them to go faster. The machine's heavy footsteps followed them, each one shaking the ground beneath their feet. Turner led the group through the narrow passageway, a thin gap between two tall, broken buildings. It was the only way to escape, but it was tight and filled with debris. The orphans had to squeeze through one by one. And the machine was too large to follow them into the small space. Cree felt the weight of the moment. The terror of being chased by a war machine, the rush of trying to survive, but they didn't dare look back. They just kept moving, pushing through the narrow gap until they finally emerged into a small clearing on the other side. "Keep going," Turner urged. "We're not safe yet." The group moved quickly, finding cover behind a set of fallen stone slabs. The machine's roaring sounds could still be heard in the distance, but it hadn't followed them into the clearing. For a brief moment, they all paused to catch their breath, their hearts pounding in their chests. Vixa looked around, her eyes scanning the area. "That was too close. We can't keep running like this. We need a plan." Turner nodded, agreed. "But we don't have much choice. We have to keep moving until we reach the supply station." Cree swallowed hard, still trying to steady their breath. "How far is it?" Turner's eyes narrowed as he checked the sky. "Not far. Maybe another few hours of walking? But if we stay here too long, we'll be vulnerable. The storm is coming." Cree's eyes flicked upward, following Turner's gaze. The sky, which had been clear just moments before, was now darkening. A thick black cloud had begun to roll in from the horizon, and the winds had started to pick up. It was going to be a storm like nothing they had seen before. Vixa stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. "We'll have to make it through. The storm will cover our tracks. We move now." Turner didn't need any further persuasion. He started moving again, leading the way as the storm began to pick up speed. The wind howled through the broken streets, and the first drops of rain began to fall, heavy and cold. The air smelled of wet earth and decay, and the ground beneath them became slippery as they pushed forward. The storm made everything more difficult. The wind seemed to tear at their clothes, and the rain soaked through the thin fabric of their shirts. The children tried to keep up, their feet slipping on the wet ground as they followed Turner's steady pace. But the storm also offered them some protection. The heavy rain and howling wind masked the sound of their footsteps, making it harder for any threats to hear them. Despite the storm's advantages, Cree could feel the fear creeping back. They had already survived so much. Could they make it to the supply station? And if they did, what would they find when they got there? They were all so tired, so hungry, and the road ahead was filled with danger. Every step forward felt like they were moving toward an unknown future. And the weight of that uncertainty pressed on Cree's chest. But even as doubt gnawed at them, they couldn't stop now. They couldn't let the storm, or the war machine, or anything else stand in their way. This was their chance, the only chance they had. If they didn't keep going, They might never get another opportunity like this. The group pressed on through the storm, their clothes soaked and their bodies exhausted. The wind pushed against them, making every step harder. But through it all, Turner kept moving, his eyes focused on the path ahead. He wasn't going to let them fail, and neither would they. Hours passed, and the storm only grew worse. The wind howled louder, and the rain came down in sheets, blinding them to everything around them. The landscape seemed to blur together, a mixture of wind, water, and broken buildings. Finally, just as they were starting to lose hope, Turner stopped and pointed. Through the rain and the storm, a shape emerged from the mist. A structure large and solid stood against the storm, its outline barely visible through the sheets of rain. It was the supply station. "We're here," Turner said, his voice almost lost in the wind. Kree's heart leaped in their chest. They had made it. They had actually made it. But even as they rushed toward the shelter of the supply station, a feeling of dread settled in. The storm had hidden them from the outside world. But what if there was more danger waiting inside? What if the supplies had already been taken? What if this wasn't the safe haven they had hoped for? As they reached the entrance, Turner gave them a reassuring glance. "Stay close. We don't know what's inside, but we'll figure it out together." The children nodded, following him inside. The door creaked open, and the group stepped into the dim light of the station. The air was stale, and the walls were lined with old equipment. But there, in the corner of the room, were shelves full of supplies, food, water, even medical kits. For the first time, in what felt like forever, they had found something more than just survival. They had found hope. The inside of the supply station was cold, its walls covered in dust and years of disuse. The flickering lights overhead barely illuminated the shelves stacked with crates of food, water, and various survival equipment. For a moment, the children stood still, eyes wide with disbelief. It had been so long since they'd seen anything resembling hope, and now, standing in the midst of the supplies. They couldn't quite believe it. Captain Turner was the first to move. "We're not out of danger yet," he said, his voice steady, despite the exhaustion in his eyes. "We need to gather what we can and get out of here before anything else comes looking for us." The children nodded, still processing the fact that they had made it this far. Kree stood frozen for a moment, looking around the room in awe. It felt unreal to them, this place. These supplies, this tiny glimmer of hope. For so long, they had only known the struggle to survive. This was something new. "Don't waste time staring," Turner added with a slight smile, as though sensing Kree's hesitation. "Take what you can carry." Ixa was the first to step forward, her 4 strong arms reaching for the crates of food. "We need more water," she said, carefully sorting through the supplies. "There's no way we can make it back without more." Kree snapped out of their daze and began helping. They grabbed as much as they could, dried rations, medical kits, and whatever else seemed useful. The others worked quickly as well, filling their packs with everything they might need for the return journey. Jill, still clutching Kree's side, hesitated as they moved toward one of the shelves. "What if this isn't enough?" The small gremlin whispered, fear in their eyes. "What if we can't make it back?" Kree placed a hand on Jill's shoulder, trying to offer comfort. "We'll make it," they said, trying to sound more confident than they felt. "We have to." Turner, who had been watching them closely, spoke up again. "Listen, I know it's been a long journey, and I know you're all scared. But I'm not giving up on you, and I don't want you to give up either. We've made it this far. That's not nothing." The children nodded, each one feeling the weight of his words. They had made it this far, and though they didn't know what dangers lay ahead, they knew they couldn't turn back. This was their chance, and they had to take it. The group spent the next hour gathering as much as they could. Turner led them through the station, checking rooms and cabinets for any supplies that could help them. There was enough food and water to last them for several days, and the medical supplies were a much-needed blessing. The orphans felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. They were so close to something that felt like safety. But they knew it wouldn't last long. "We'll leave at dawn," Turner said as they finished packing. "We need to rest now. You've all been through a lot. But tomorrow, we leave." The children didn't need to be told twice. They found corners of the station to rest in, laying out their blankets and huddling together for warmth. The storm had passed, but the air was still damp and cold. The soft hum of the station's failing power system was the only sound in the room as they tried to sleep. The next morning, the group set out early. Turner had plotted the route they would take back, but the journey would not be easy. The storm from the previous day had made the terrain even more treacherous, and the wind had blown debris into the path. It was clear that they would have to be cautious. As they left the supply station behind, Cree couldn't help but look back one last time. The place had been their brief sanctuary, a fleeting moment of hope in a world that had long since abandoned them. But now, they had to move forward. They couldn't afford to stay in one place for too long. The return journey was just as difficult as the one before, if not harder. The ground was slippery, and the wind made it nearly impossible to see ahead. The landscape had become even more desolate as they moved through the remains of old cities and ruined buildings. Every step forward felt like a battle against the elements, but they pressed on. Turner moved ahead, taking the lead as usual. He navigated the broken paths with surprising ease, guiding the orphans through the wreckage. His confidence was reassuring, even if Cree still didn't completely trust him. There was something about him, a quiet strength, a sense of purpose that made the children believe he would do everything in his power to keep them safe. As they moved through the desolation, the silence between them grew. The journey had become physically exhausting. Though the group was determined to make it back, it was clear that they were all struggling. Even Turner's usual calm demeanor seemed to be slipping. Cree could see it in his eyes. He was tired too, and they weren't even halfway back yet. "We should rest," Turner said suddenly, breaking the silence. He stopped in front of a large building that seemed mostly intact. "We've been walking for hours. If we keep pushing, we won't make it." The children agreed, too tired to argue. They found a spot near the building, sheltered from the wind, and began to settle in. As they sat down, Cree couldn't help but look at Turner again. He had brought them this far. He had kept his promise of helping them despite the risks, despite the dangers. Cree had always heard stories of humans being ruthless, only caring for themselves. But this human, Captain Turner, was different. He was kind when he didn't have to be. He could have left them behind, but he hadn't. He had chosen to help them, to believe in them when no one else would. Cree looked at the others. Vixa was sitting against the wall, eyes closed, trying to rest, while Jill had curled up beside them, exhausted but safe for the moment. The youngest had finally fallen asleep, and for once, there was peace. Turner sat a few feet away from the group, his eyes scanning the horizon. He didn't seem to need sleep as much as the others did, his attention always sharp, always watching. Cree approached him cautiously, unsure of what to say. They had spent so much time together, but there were still things left unsaid between them. "Why did you come here?" Cree asked softly, standing next to him. "Why did you help us?" Turner turned his head, meeting Cree's eyes. For a long moment he didn't answer, as if the question had caught him off guard. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know," he said, his voice low and thoughtful. "Maybe because I couldn't ignore you. I saw you out there, surviving. You're stronger than anyone gives you credit for. I thought I could help you. I thought maybe you'd be able to show me something I hadn't seen before." Cree blinked, surprised by the honesty in his words. They hadn't expected an answer like that. They had always assumed that humans helped others for some reward, for something in return. But Turner wasn't asking for anything. He was just helping because it was the right thing to do. "I don't know if I'll ever understand humans," Cree said quietly. "But you're different. You don't act like what we were taught." Turner smiled faintly. "Maybe it's because you've never seen what's underneath the surface. Not all humans are what you've heard. I'm not here for anything other than to make sure you don't have to suffer anymore." Cree nodded, their heart heavy with both gratitude and confusion. There was so much they still didn't understand about Turner, about humans. But they were beginning to realize that it didn't matter. What mattered was that they were together now. And as long as they had each other, they would survive. As the day stretched on, the group packed up and began the final leg of their journey. They still had a long way to go, but now there was something different in the air. The orphans walked a little taller, their steps a little steadier. Knowing they had made it through the hardest part of the journey, with Turner by their side, they felt ready to face whatever came next. The galaxy might have forgotten them. But they had found something more important, a human who had shown them that. Even in the darkest places, there could still be light.